Hello and welcome, you guys. Today I'm going to be talking about what I think is one of the most fantastic plants on probably this whole planet. This here is azalea, the broadleaf indoor azalea, also known as Rhododendron simsii. It's native to eastern coastal parts of Asia. I know it's native to the Ningbo region of China. It's also native to Malaysia. It's native to the Okinawa Islands in southern Japan and Taiwan. So this plant here is it's just stunning. Like, I mean, how can you not enjoy these flowers, right? The color is almost unreal. It's not showing up the same on camera as it is in real life, but it's kind of like pink mixed with undertones of purple, with undertones of like peach and a little bit of red in there, and it's just so beautiful. So, just a few things I really wanted to talk about with this plant that I'm going to try to get through in this video is how to prolong the life of this plant, because I know a lot of people try keeping them for multiple years and then they end up kind of dwindling out, especially indoors. And I want to tell you guys how to increase its bloom time. So, and just some basic information. So this plant here obviously resembles azaleas or rhododendrons. It has the same compound leaf. The blooms are in clusters of up to 6. And the beautiful thing about this plant, I'll try to find an example, is you'll see one individual bud like this. And as you close in, you soon figure out that it's actually multiple flowers. This is a good example here, right here, that actually produce rosettes, which is quite lovely. And you just get this beautiful carpet of flowers too. So this has a mounding slash trailing habit to it, but it can be trained into a bonsai, it can be trained into a shrub or like a standard or a topiary. It has a cold hardiness of, I would say, about negative 3 degrees Celsius. It's not very cold hardy at all, especially not compared to the broadleaf azaleas uh, or especially the kind of more, um, man, what do you call that? Like the continental climate ones, the deciduous azaleas, like the St. Helens variety. This one here is nowhere near as cold hardy. So I highly recommend bringing this indoors during the winter months. I bring mine indoors in about October and I take them back outside after the last spring frost. So with these plants here, if you're going to prune them right after they're done blooming. You do not want to prune them while they're blooming because the plant's already putting so much energy into that profusion of blooms. And then eventually it just kind of wanes out and then the plant just goes into shock. And then usually you'll get like chlorotic leaves, you'll get like a great susceptibility to pythium and all sorts of root diseases and fungal illnesses. So you don't want to prune them very much or even at all as they're in bloom. However, with that said, if you see like a spent bloom like this one over here, just feel free to pinch it at its base. Or if you see a tiny little bit of dieback on some of the buds, you can prune those out too. I find that usually when this plant gets a little bit too hot, especially indoors, it'll go into like a growth phase. So this here is like a new terminal growth shoot, as opposed to like the more mature blooming wood. By the way, this plant here only blooms on second year growth. I think that's important to mention. So if you keep it a little bit too warm, sometimes the buds will die off a little bit and the sheath will turn brown. This is what a healthy bud should look like. And these here are kind of exhausted buds here. So to avoid that, you want to keep it in a relatively cool area. If you're going to keep it in a house, keep it in a very bright area, but not one that has a lot of direct sunlight, as I find that they quickly go out of bloom and then they kind of diminish, especially if it's pretty low humidity. So you really want to be careful with these guys indoors. If you grow them indoors, you want to water them, I would say, a little bit more sparingly than most azaleas, especially because if you have them in this sheath that they usually come in the store, they tend to stay saturated and the water sits. And then you get all sorts of like rot and stuff like that too, which you don't want. So another thing I really wanted to say that I highly recommend that I didn't do with this plant quite yet is to get rid of the sheath at the bottom and immediately as quickly as you can. I've been very busy so I haven't done it. Repotting it to a slightly wider pot, because when they force these plants in nurseries and stuff like that, they tend to heavily restrict the root zone and they tend to really quite feed them with very high phosphorus to be able to get all these blooms so that you see them all beautiful in the supermarket, right? So yeah, I highly recommend you go up at least an inch in width in pot upon bringing this at home. And another thing I really wanted to mention, sorry, I got my hands kind of full. Just gonna try to peel back the plastic to show you guys. Is you got multiple stems. If you've ever grown a gardenia or an ixora or something like that, you can divide these. But I don't recommend doing it until the plant is well established, as it can shock the root system, and oftentimes they're quite pot bound when you buy them from the store. And this is where you get those beautiful opportunities for bonsai. Many of them have really quite intricate woody features to them, and the juvenile wood in this plant does not last very long. It goes corky and barky quite quickly. It's an extremely woody plant. So, you can keep these potentially indefinitely, but most people will grow them as an annual, quite simply because they take a lot of babying and care to be able to get them to survive from season to season. So I find that there's a couple of times within the year where you really have to be careful that these don't expire. And I think that's October and the late winter. So late winter, early spring, the big problem a lot of people will face with these is the lack of light indoors, especially in the northern hemisphere, and these plants will often go a pale kind of lime color just due to the lack of exposure of direct sunlight. And then they can't photosynthesize properly and they just diminish, and then you're left with a really straggly, etiolated plant that can't really fend for itself. Another thing that I've noticed a lot of people have trouble with this plant is when they're bringing it in October, because I find a lot of times people fail to acclimate them back into the indoor climate, and it kind of shocks the plant because immediately people have their heaters on inside and it's a lot more dry inside. There's way less relative humidity, sometimes as low as like 40%. And then this plant just completely dries up. All of its buds, including its growing points, just crenate and dry up and fall off. And then you end up losing the majority of your canopy. And it's just detrimental to the plant's health, and oftentimes it kills it. So you don't want to do that if you want this to live for a long time. Another thing is people tend to underfeed this plant. So this is a very heavily feeding type of rhododendron or azalea. I highly recommend that in the summer, in the active growing season, so here in June going into, I'd say up till about early September, you want to give it a lot of liquid feed. Going into July and August, I'm going to be giving this liquid feed about once a week, just an average 7 drops Miracle Grow liquid feed. And that just also prolongs the bloom cycle and just sort of toughens up this plant for later on in the year so that it can really thrive. Some common problems that people will have with this plant is discoloration in the petals of the flowers, and this here can be remedied with proper temperature. I think the proper temperature for these while they're flowering is approximately 18 degrees Celsius. From what I've experienced, I've had this blooming at about 18 degrees Celsius indoors for a while, and it's been blooming consistently and profusely. Nighttime temperature is a little bit more kind of subdued, more like 15, 16 degrees Celsius tends to be ideal for this plant to maintain that carpet of blooms. You never want to let them get to freezing. I find that I had one of the I've had a lot of trial and error, and I have failed with quite a few of these. Actually, I'm finally starting to get it right. So that's why I really want you guys to avoid the mistakes that I have made in the past. And one of those huge mistakes is to let this get down to freezing. You do not want this to go down to 0. You don't want to expose it to ice or cold chills or anything like that. It just kills the plant almost overnight, much like it would with a poinsettia when you're getting it at Christmas time. You want to avoid, like, even when you're bringing it home, if you buy it later on in the season, you want to avoid, you want to wrap it up when you bring it to your car so it doesn't get too much cold exposure, because it really hates that. With that said, this plant will not bloom if you leave it in a very direct sun place over the summer. I find that it's a really good way to just cook off all of your flowers and kill them if you have a lot of ample heat and direct sunlight. So you want to avoid that at all costs too. So I think the main tips that I have for this plant here are moderation, heavy feeding, and by moderation I mean moderation in respects of light and temperature. Don't water it as much as you think you have to water it. Repot it, make sure it has a huge pot, and just make sure it has bright filtered light. And I think that temperature range of around 18 degrees Celsius is absolutely phenomenal for this plant. And I think for many years it'll reward you with so many different blooms. It's, I mean, amazing how quickly this blooms. You don't want to trim it too much, because then you can potentially kill off all your blooms for the next 2 years if you even shear it back a little bit. But yeah, if you're gonna feed it, use like a 10-20-20 fertilizer or a 20-20-20 fertilizer, something that's a little bit more high on potassium and phosphorus, and something that's quite all-purpose or like generalist for fertilizers. So this here is one of my absolute favorite plants. I think it's absolutely striking. This here is the Rhododendron simsii, or the festive indoor broadleaf azalea. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day. You guys truly deserve the best. And stay happy and healthy, you guys. And thank you for listening. I know I talked a lot about this in this video, but I mean, just, it's pure happiness. So yeah, have a good one, you guys.